I mean no one, is interested in or takes seriously lectures on border security from Senate Republicans. No one. In one of the most stunning acts of political cowardice in recent American history, a bipartisan border security bill co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee was put forward in the U.S. Senate. It would have tightened asylum standards to stop exploitation of the asylum system. It would have surged enforcement resources to the border. It would have meant more expedited removals of those who enter this country unlawfully. It would have empowered the federal government to take the fight to the drug cartels who are laying waste to communities across our country with fentanyl. A bipartisan border security bill co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee. And it wasn't just voted down by Senate Republicans, it was denied even a debate on the floor of the United States Senate. Because the former president of the United States, and he said this publicly, thought it wasn't in his political interest for the nation to be served. It wasn't in his political interest for a bipartisan border security bill to be enacted by Congress. The American people are smart. So all of the performative chest-pounding today on border security is utterly disingenuous. When Senate Republicans abrogated their basic governing responsibility and refused even to let us debate and amend that bipartisan border security proposal, the American people see that and understand that. But Mr. Secretary, the American people also see and understand what's happening at the southern border. And just as they see the hypocrisy and cowardice of Senate Republicans on border security, they do not see success in the administration's handling of the crisis at the southern border. And I wonder if you have reckoned fully with the fact that you do not have a good faith partner in the minority party in Congress willing to work with you to advance bipartisan border security legislation. You are going to have to rely on your authorities, and it is past time to do so. So to the extent you have additional legal authorities that you can responsibly deploy to control this unacceptable crisis at the southern border that threatens our national security, it is long past time to do so. And that brings me to the budget request, because I can't understand this, Mr. Secretary. It's a $3 billion decrease from fiscal year 24 for CBP. You agree, I presume, that the situation of the southern border is a serious threat to U.S. national security?
I do, Senator. We
and that CBP personnel are essential to tackling this crisis, Mr. Secretary.
Most certainly.
And the President recently commented publicly that there were not sufficient Customs and Border Patrol officers and agents at the border, correct?
We need more resources, and one of those resources is additional personnel, Senator.
So why are you requesting a $3 billion decrease in the CBP budget for FY25?
Senator, the construct that we have proposed is a baseline budget plus a $4.7 billion contingency fund, and I am not certain that you are accounting for that $4.7 billion contingency fund in the gross amount that we are requesting for fiscal year 2025. That contingency fund is really the model is that additional funds would be released to us based on the number of encounters that we experience at the southern border. And so that $4.7 billion must be included when looking at our fiscal year 2025 request.
Are those funds explicitly allocated and reserved for hiring and deploying CBP officers?
They include our ability to hire
but it's
additional
funds
personnel.
that could be used for other purposes. I cannot This is an insufficient request of the U.S. Congress, given the severity of what we're facing at the southern border.
I would be very, very pleased to work with this committee and the Congress on increasing the resources above and beyond that which has been requested.
So given the
Senator,
urgency of the need, why did you not request more funding for Customs and Border Patrol?
Senator, we work within the context of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. We continue to believe that the extraordinary resources that would have been delivered under the Senate's bipartisan legislation would have been transformative, not only in the provision of resources, but in the delivery of authorities that we currently do not have.
And I agree with you, but President Trump killed the bill for political reasons, and it's gone. You don't have a good faith partner in the minority here. Only you, through the funds that you request and use from the Congress in the appropriations process, and by using those authorities that there's discussion of you exercising, only you have the power to address this crisis, and I urge you to act with utter urgency to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ranking Member Paul, the parole process is one that we execute according to the law. We make individualized determinations with respect to significant public benefit or an urgent humanitarian reason.
So for what reason was the alleged killer of Laken Riley, Jose Ibarra, paroled and allowed to come into this country?
Ranking Member Paul, first and foremost, all our hearts break for the family of Ms. Riley. Secondly, the perpetrator of this heinous criminal act needs to meet justice to the fullest extent of the law, and I will not comment on the particulars of the case because the matter is being prosecuted by authorities now.
This isn't on the case of whether or not he murdered her. This is on the case of why you paroled him. Why was he paroled?
My same answer, Ranking Member Paul.
You're refusing to answer the question?
I have provided my answer, Ranking Member Paul.
You're refusing to give any specifics about Jose Ibarra. Well, I have the documentation, and the document says that the subject, the person accused of killing Laken Riley, was paroled due to detention capacity. It was full. So is detention capacity statutorily allowed to be used as a reasoning for parole?
Allow me to assure you that individuals who pose a public safety threat or national security are our highest priority for detention. The reality, not just with respect to this administration, but every administration that precedes me, is that the number of encounters has exceeded the number of detention beds available.
The question is it statutorily, legally allowed to use the excuse that our camp is full? He was paroled due to detention capacity. Is that allowed under the law?
Ranking Member Paul, my prior answer stands.
Which means you're not going to answer the question. Are you pleading the Fifth Amendment?
No, Ranking Member Paul, I've answered the question.
Well, no, you haven't. The question is very specific. You have testified previously, and you have testified today, that there are two reasons you can be paroled: urgent humanitarian need or significant public benefit. That's not the reason listed. The reason listed is parole due to detention capacity. Is parole due to detention capacity a lawful reason for paroling someone?
Ranking Member Paul, there are different bases for parole. I am not a legal expert in this regard, but let me assure you that when an individual is encountered at the border and they are deemed to be, at the time of encounter, a threat to public safety or national security, they are a priority for detention. If not, they receive a notice to appear and are placed in immigration enforcement proceedings. The number of individuals encountered at the border exceed the number of beds available in our detention facilities. That is not something specific to this administration. That is something that has been true.
You might have more beds if they remained in Mexico. Did the administration, when you came into office, reversed 92 executive orders of the Trump administration, which allowed them to apparently have people remain in Mexico, allowed them to have, probably 90% less parolees than you have. And so when you come to us and you say, oh, gosh, if we only had more legislation, we could do it, why don't you bring back the executive orders of Donald Trump that seem to be working? You immediately got rid of them for political purposes. The border's a disaster. Why don't you bring back the 92 executive orders that you reversed?
I respectfully, Ranking Member Paul, disagree with the premise of your question.
That's because you refuse to look at the facts, and it's still, I guess, insulting to all of us and insulting to the memory of Laken Riley and to the memory of others who have been killed by people who came into this country. March 2nd, an illegal alien who got into the country as a got-away killed Washington State Trooper Christopher Gadd. Haitian man who entered the U.S. via the CHNV parole program was arrested for sexual assault of a 15-year-old girl. March 21st, illegal aliens in El Paso rushed the fence. You saw that on national television. An illegal alien on March 23rd murdered 25-year-old Michigan resident Ruby Garcia. Chinese national came across the border and illegally breached a military base in California. I mean, the stories go on, and I think a lot of people in America are going to be appalled, that you refuse to answer the questions. Jose Ibarra, was it lawful to parole him? Was it lawful to let him in the country because you say the camp's full?
Ranking Member Paul is a former federal prosecutor for 12 years. I can say with tremendous conviction that individuals who commit criminal acts need to be held accountable for their crimes.
This in the House Homeland Security Committee. I've got the transcript right here in front of me. You were asked the same question. Jose Ibarra, why was he paroled? You said, I don't know. You said, I don't know. I don't have the case details with me today. Congressman Bishop says, you don't know? And you said, I don't know. I don't have the details with respect to that individual's case, but I would be pleased to provide them to you, Congressman. You didn't know 2 days ago. Now, interestingly, on April the 10th, 6 days before that, you gave Senator Katie Britt a different answer. She asked you the same question. She said, why was Jose Ibarra paroled into the United States? You said, and I quote, Ranking Member Britt, there was no derogatory information of which we were aware. So you were happy to comment on the case then, on April the 10th. By April the 16th, you had developed amnesia, and today you say you just won't comment. So which is it, Mr. Secretary? Now that we have the file, I'll tell you what the difference is. Congressman Bishop didn't have the parole file, and Senator Britt didn't have the parole file, and now we do have the parole file. And now we all know that the reason he was paroled into this country was because lack of detention capacity, which, as you and I both know, is not a valid reason under the statute. And now that we know that for sure, this is right out of the parole file. Here it is. Subject was paroled due to detention capacity at the Central Processing Center in El Paso, Texas. Now suddenly you don't want to talk about it. This is extraordinary. It's also a pattern with you. So let me just try one more time. Have you read the parole file?
Senator, I'm going to give the same answer, and let me say
well, which one? Are you going to give me the answer you gave to Senator Britt? Are you going to give the answer you gave to Congressman Bishop, or the answer you gave to Senator Paul, or do you want to try a fourth one?
Senator, I will not speak to the particulars of the case, given the pending criminal process.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Well, you certainly, of course you don't want to, because it is an absolutely damning indictment of your policies. Let's just review Jose Ibarra, and how he came to be here. On September the 8th, 2022, he was encountered by United States Border Patrol in El Paso, Texas, and was paroled into the United States due to lack of detention capacity. A provision, a proviso, a rule that is not permitted under the statute. You and I both know you know this. You knew it when you were talking to Congressman Bishop. You knew it when you were testifying to Senator Britt, and you know it today. You just never wanted to cop to it, because the statute doesn't permit it. And so you lied to Congressman Bishop, and you lied to Senator Britt. And now you are hiding behind the ongoing prosecution excuse because it's the last one left to you, because you testified falsely under oath. Then on July 19th, 2023, Ibarra reports for a biometric appointment and was fingerprinted. This is now in New York. The results come back and indicate he has a criminal history. So he's in this country, he has a criminal history. September 14th, he is arrested in New York by NYPD for what? Injuring a child. September 14th, 2023, he is arrested for injuring a child. What happens? The offense was never prosecuted, and the arrest was expunged. I'm reading right out of the parole file. Expunged. Nothing is done to this guy. He had a criminal record to start with. He's in the country on illegal grounds. You have falsely and illegally allowed him in. He commits a crime against a child. He's not prosecuted. It's expunged. In November, get this, in November, Ibarra files an application for employment authorization. And unbelievably, on December the 9th, 2023, it's approved. So this is your policies in action, Mr. Secretary. A criminal is permitted into this country on grounds flatly not permitted, flatly contradictory to the statute. He commits a crime against a child, and then he gets a work permit. He gets a work permit. You want to know why all of the jobs in the last 2 or 3 years have gone to illegal migrants? Working people in this country can't get a job. Their unemployment rate's high. Why? Because of things like this. And then what's he do? Well, we all know. Then in February, he commits the heinous crime against Laken Riley. Is this a record that you are proud of?
Senator, you've misstated some facts.
I have read from the parole file, which you have said you don't recall, don't have, you miscited. I'm reading from it. It is right here. And I've just, pursuant to the speech and debate clause, I have just read it into the record. And the reason is, you have lied repeatedly to Congress and to the American people about this. They deserve to know. And the only way they're going to know is if I tell them. I've just told them. It's in the record now. I've read it verbatim from the parole file. Verbatim. I just want to know, why did you change your story so often? Why didn't you just answer honestly to Congressman Bishop and Senator Britt?
Senator, I am confident that justice will be vindicated in the criminal prosecution of the case.
Well, hopefully he'll get more of a trial than you got. Otherwise, there'll be no justice for anyone at all. Let me ask you something else. Travis Wolf, do you know that name?
Not off the top of my head.
Travis Wolf is a 12-year-old boy from Missouri. This is him. Travis was killed on December 20th, 2023, or I should say he was in a tragic attack on that night. He died some weeks later, head-on collision. The person driving the vehicle, who's now been charged with 6 criminal counts, is Indrina Bracco. Do you know who that is?
I do not, but let me communicate that I know that all of our hearts break for the family of this young boy who died in that accident.
About might be ones we could prevent in the future if Senator Hawley and his colleagues on the other side of the aisle had voted for a bipartisan measure that would have significantly increased our detention capacity, our personnel, would have changed policies for standards of who could seek and be granted asylum. But as the chair noted at the beginning of this hearing, there are people, it appears, who are more interested in throwing rocks than solving problems. So I appreciate the hard work that you did, Mr. Secretary, and your team did to try to help us broker that bipartisan deal that would have improved our capacity to secure the border. So let me just start with my first question. The most important task for the government is keeping its citizens safe. That includes keeping our border secure. Last year, DHS set a new record for the number of people it encountered at the southwest border. Based on DHS's own data for the first 5 months of this current fiscal year, DHS has already encountered more than 1.3 million people, and the department is on pace for even more total encounters than last year. I've traveled to our U.S.-Mexico border multiple times. I've seen and heard firsthand the challenges that our border agents and officers face. DHS needs to do everything it can to address the crisis along the southern border, improve operational control, and track who and what is entering our country. Mr. Secretary, what are 1 or 2 specific resources or authorities that you need to improve the department's operational control of the border?
Thank you very much, Senator, for the question. We need more personnel. We need more funds to enhance our work with our partners to the south, more funds to execute more removal flights, to work our interdiction efforts with Mexico, Panama, Colombia, countries along the migratory path. The key, or one key, Senator, is to reduce the number of individuals that whom we encounter at the border in the first instance. And then we need additional resources to ensure that we can remove those who do not qualify for relief under our laws as quickly as possible. We need a holistic approach, and the bipartisan Senate legislation that was negotiated would have delivered a holistic approach.
Well, thank you. It also would have delivered additional help when it comes to the fentanyl crisis that we have, and that's the topic of my second question. Fentanyl and other deadly synthetic opioids are causing devastating overdoses in the Granite State and in communities all across our country. Due to the strength of synthetic opioids, criminal organizations are able to smuggle fentanyl in smaller and smaller quantities, which makes it far harder to detect and interdict. What additional equipment and resources does DHS need to detect fentanyl that cartels smuggle into our country, including in smaller and more difficult to detect packages?
Senator, the majority of the fentanyl smuggled into our country is smuggled in passenger vehicles and commercial trucks through our ports of entry. What we need there is funding for non-intrusive inspection technology and additional funding for more personnel. That is with respect to the ports of entry. Those are two examples of what is needed. With respect to the small quantities, we need additional personnel because there is a de minimis exemption under the law with respect to small parcels, and I have visited our mail facilities, for example, in Kennedy International Airport, where we see dangerous narcotics smuggled into the country. We need personnel and technology to enhance our capabilities there. Those are just some of the examples.
Well, thank you. One of the other areas where we really have to push is with the supply chain to the cartels of the precursor chemicals. So I've pushed the Chinese government to do more to stop illegal trafficking of fentanyl precursors to Mexico from China, which the cartels then use to manufacture and smuggle fentanyl into the United States. How are Homeland Security investigations and Custom and Border Protection working to disrupt this global supply chain for illegal fentanyl?
If I may say just a few predicate things, Senator. We are focused every single day on the fight against fentanyl, which is the most dangerous drug that I have seen in my 22 years of public service, and I prosecuted black tar heroin traffickers. The mortality rate, the fatality that fentanyl causes is unprecedented. And we fight every day against this scourge. It is a scourge that is not 1, 2, or 3 years in the making. This has been many, many years. In fact, and I believe it is in 2020 that 57,000 deaths at the hands of the deadly fentanyl occurred. Just a couple months ago, I met with my counterpart from the People's Republic of China to confront the issue of the precursor chemicals and the equipment used to manufacture fentanyl emanating from the People's Republic of China. And we are seeking to tackle that challenge in a very difficult relationship. But we are very focused on the scourge of fentanyl from all perspectives.